Welcome. This presentation will cover the program design phase of ESP development. Programs are the core of the ESP document, detailing the objectives, strategies, and activities with related indicators and targets that will allow you to reach overall policy goals. Each program should be designed by the experts working in the particular field. For example, individuals from the Teacher Development Department will work on the program related to teacher training. This phase will be the most time-consuming and will require adequate technical support in program design techniques from knowledgeable individuals.
Here is an overview of the overall ESP structure. As you can see, the priority programs are derived from the overall plan vision and policy priorities. Each priority program is broken down into sub-programs or components with relevant strategies and activities that will enable the sub-program objectives to be achieved, ultimately contributing to the program goal. Before beginning the nitty-gritty of the program design, it will be important to decide on how priority programs will be structured in the plan. There are many ways to structure programs, including by subsector, by thematic entry point, such as access, quality, management, or a mixed approach that combines subsector and thematic entry. It is also important to note that the terminology of program design varies between plans, and there is no one ideal structure or terminology. The important thing is to be consistent in the use of terms throughout the process. In this presentation and in your group work, we are proposing to use an entry by subsector, meaning that ECE primary, lower and upper secondary will be treated as stand-alone priority programs. Within each, the key thematic areas will be addressed.
When designing your program structure, you must also decide how to handle cross-cutting issues, such as gender, disability-inclusive education, education for sustainable development, etc. These issues could have their own separate program, could be integrated as sub-programs in other priority programs, or could be fully mainstreamed within sub-programs as strategies.
Here, using the regular ESP structure, we are illustrating how ECE could be included as a standalone priority program and potential related subprograms. Once the overall priority program structure is determined, the technical working groups can begin on their program design, utilizing a program design template. Note that different priority program design templates exist. Here is the one that we will be using in Solimana. The template draws from the logical framework approach. We will cover the logical framework in more depth in Unit 3, but you might already want to look at the Unit 3 workbook annex for an explanation of this approach and an example of a log frame. As you can see, the activities and strategies allow you to meet the subprogram objective, and all subprogram objectives ultimately contribute to the priority program goal. In order to begin our priority program design for early childhood education, let's return to our developed EC Access objective tree from last week. It will be a useful jumping off point for our EC Access subprogram design, as it already allowed us to identify an objective and associated strategies and activities, along with a broader goal. We will now go through the process step by step of transforming our ECE Access objective tree into a fully developed ECE Access subprogram. While the full subsector design includes selecting indicators and targets, for now let's just focus on developing the subprogram objective strategies and activities. We will return to fill in the indicators, baselines, targets, and means of verification at the end of the presentation. Looking at our ECE objective tree, we can take our objective ECE Access Increased which can then become our subprogram objective. We may then want to further expand the objective statement. Try to be as specific as possible, considering the policy discussions that have occurred so far and what the plan hopes to achieve around this particular issue. For example, perhaps it is a major objective in the plan not just to increase EC access, but for EC access to be equitable for all groups of children. We can therefore formulate the subprogram objective as increased equitable access to early childhood education for all children. Now moving on to strategies and activities. The first row of our objective tree will be our strategies, and each of the blocks below that strategy will be the corresponding activities. Taking the first group of blocks on the far left of the tree, we can write the strategy Early Childhood Education Costs Reduced in the template under Strategy 1.1.1. As this will be an ongoing strategy, we will want to put it in the present tense, so it would be reduce early childhood education costs. We can then include the three activities, implement school feeding programs, provide targeted cash grants to families, and foster free public early childhood education underneath this strategy. We then continue with the rest of the tree until we've included all the activities and strategies into the program design template.
Lastly, the goal from our objective tree can be used to help construct the priority program goal. This again will not be as straightforward and will take some reflection in consideration of all of the ECE subprogram objectives. For example, a global ECE priority program objective, utilizing our goal from the objective tree as a base, could be all children have access to quality, equitable early childhood education, providing them with the foundational skills and knowledge to succeed in primary schooling. You may be thinking, great, my program design is already done. Well, sorry, but not quite. As mentioned, the objective tree is the jumping off point for program design, but will likely not be the final version. After having transferred the objective strategies and activities from the tree into our sub-program design template, we will need to make adjustments and have further discussions within the technical working group to make sure that the strategies and activities are relevant, coherent, and sufficient to reach the subprogram objective. First, we can ask ourselves if our strategies are sufficient and relevant to reach the subprogram objective. As in, are there any major strategies missing? Related to this, are the strategies coherent and compatible with one another and with the subprogram objective? Our major three strategies allow us to tackle supply-side issues through the expansion of ECE programs in rural areas, as well as demand-side issues through reducing cost and increasing parent demand. We have therefore covered the major relevant areas for ECE access, and they are all coherent and complementary. However, there is one piece of the program objective that may not be entirely addressed. We have emphasized increasing equitable access to ECE for all children. To achieve this, we might want to adjust our supply-related strategy 1.1.3 to ensure that we are expanding programs to be accessible and compatible for marginalized groups. Our data has shown us that girls and children with disabilities have particularly low enrollment rates in ECE, due in part to lack of gender and disability inclusive school infrastructure. We can therefore adjust strategy 1.1.3 to read, expand early childhood education programs that are gender sensitive and disability inclusive in rural areas.
Now moving on to the activities. First, we should ask if all the activities within each strategy are appropriate and relevant to the set strategy and subprogram objective. In our example, we are designing the subprogram for early childhood education access. Therefore, all of the activities should be focused on ECE access. However, there may be some ECE activities from the objective tree that will actually be more appropriately tackled in another subprogram. Can you spot among our activities two that could be more appropriate within other subprograms? The activity Train Teachers, while related to access, is more directly connected to EC quality. It can be kept in the overall EC priority program, but would make more sense to be addressed in the EC quality subprogram. Likewise, providing incentives for teachers is a management issue and should therefore be placed in the governance and management subprogram. Again, this does not mean that these activities should be deleted completely. You may need to liaise with the appropriate technical working group to make sure it is somehow addressed in their subprograms. Are all of the activities within a given strategy sufficient and relevant? Are there any refinements you can make to your activities or additional activities that can be added to better respond to the related strategy and subprogram objective? Here we can adjust some of the activities in strategy 1.1.3 to address the inclusion of girls and students with disabilities. We can specify that the ECE school building standards will be disability inclusive and gender sensitive. Accordingly, we will build safe, disability inclusive, gender sensitive, child friendly ECE facilities. We can also add an additional activity to upgrade existing schools to ensure they meet the new national requirements. We can likewise adjust some of the activities to be more specific and relevant. Foster free public ECE is quite broad. We could instead specify that the activity would be, for instance, to foster free public early childhood education through assessing sustainable strategies to reduce or remove school fees. Provide targeted cash grants could also be refined to specify that they would be entitled to disadvantaged families, as they are the ones who will need support with ECE costs.
Again, our strategy and activity design is not yet complete. This is just a first round of adjustments. We will continue to make these necessary refinements to our programs throughout the rest of the ESP development process. We will now quickly review defining indicators, setting targets, and indicating baselines and means of verification, which you will be doing as part of the initial priority program design. These topics will, however, be more extensively addressed in Unit 3, Section 1, when we discuss the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Framework. If you would already like more detailed guidance in these areas, you can already have a look at Workbook Number 3. Every intervention requires choosing indicators that will support management, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, as well as decision-making processes. An indicator is a measurable factor or characteristic that can be used to show progress towards the achievement of a particular result. You will be using different levels of indicators throughout your plan to track whether specific activities are implemented and to what extent objectives are being reached. Indicators are usually quantitative statistical measures, such as a number, percentage, rate, ratio, or index. For example, the number of schools built, percentage of teachers trained, the gross enrollment rate, pupil-to-teacher ratio, or gender parity index. In some cases, particularly for activities, indicators may be qualitative. Rather than measuring changes in numbers, qualitative indicators measure whether a particular criteria has been met, such as whether a strategy has been developed or a student tracking tool was implemented. Indicators should be SMART, meaning they should be specific, indicating precisely what is to be achieved, measurable, being easily quantifiable, achievable, attainable with the resources available, relevant, useful to achieve the overall goal, and time-bound, contained to a certain time frame.
Indicators should be accompanied with baseline and target values that are aligned with the indicator using the same measurement unit. While baseline data establishes a foundation from which to measure changes, the situation prior to the intervention, Targets provide a benchmark against which performance can be assessed. As far as the target is concerned, one can distinguish between intermediate target values that consist of the values to be attained during each year of program implementation, and the final target value, which is the value that the indicator should attain by the end of the plan. Target setting is usually based on previous trends and on a careful assessment of what is likely to be achieved over the program or plan duration. Indicators and their related baseline and targets serve to describe a situation, measure progress, and can alert when progress is not on track and could jeopardize a program or plan's success. In our example, a relevant indicator to track access to ECE could be the ECE gross enrollment rate. The baseline is the value of the gross enrollment rate prior to the start of the plan, 60% in 2022. The final target is what we hope to achieve at the end of the plan, 85% GER by 2027. Some intermediate annual targets can also be identified. The simulation model will be very helpful in that regard, as we'll further see in Units 2 and 3. During the process of identifying indicators, it is essential to determine where and how the data will be collected. A source of information, also known as the means of verification, must be indicated for each indicator. The means of verification indicates where the information can be retrieved. There are a variety of data sources that can be utilized, including administrative data, such as EMIS, FMIS, and HRMIS, statistical yearbooks, budget books, regular survey data, such as demographic and health surveys, and multiple indicator cluster surveys, specific data such as beneficiary satisfaction, inspectorate reports, activity reports, partner project reports, qualitative case studies, observations, beneficiaries' feedback, and interviews and focus groups with key informants. Here are some examples of indicators, baselines, targets, and means of verification for our subprogram objective and activities. We hope that you now feel ready to begin transforming your own objective trees into subprograms.